Welcome to At a Crossroads with the Naked Podcaster. I'm your host, Jen Taylor. This podcast is for those of you who know that you are built with strength and love that is meant to shine through in times of conflict and in times of celebration. Please subscribe, like, leave a review, and connect with me. All the links are in the description, and I personally respond to every comment and every contact. I cannot wait to engage with you. Let's get started. Hello, welcome to At a Crossroads with the Naked Podcaster. I'm Jen Taylor, and today, right now, I have Zack Rutledge on. Zack, how are you?
I'm doing well, Jen. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited. This has been on the books for a while, and I think things happen for a reason, and this is when people need to hear your story. So I'm super excited about that. Let's jump in, and everything is in the description. You guys can get everything in the description. Let's jump in on Amazon and the book.
Yeah, so you want me to talk about the book?
Yes.
Sorry about that. There's a little bit of a glitch there, a tech glitch. So I wrote this book called The Official Depression Relief Playbook, and it is exactly what it sounds like, right? So if anybody's suffering from depression, this may be a good place to start. So essentially, I wrote this book when COVID hit. I had lost my job, and I was just kind of looking for things to do, and in the middle of looking for different jobs, which was obviously pretty tough 3 months into the pandemic. I had a lot of people reaching out to me because they had known my journey beforehand, and they had known where I had gone, and they were like, I could really use some help. Just coping with this. The pandemic had triggered a lot of things for a lot of people, of course. So I would write them an email, and invariably they'd forget about it. So I'd have to write them another email. They'd delete it or something. And this actually happened again. Back when I was in grad school, I had some people reaching out to me looking for help. So, and the same thing would happen where I'd write these emails and people would lose things. We'd have conversations, they'd forget. And I would joke for years. I said, I'm just going to write a book. And the joke just eventually, literally, cut to 4 months out of the pandemic, I was like, you know what? It's time to write that book, because I'm tired of telling all these people all these things, having them forget about it. So I wrote the book, and it's been a really great thing. It's been, it's brought so much back to me, just in terms of getting emails, people really appreciating it. It's been a really nice thing. So it was just a nice little surprise to come out of the pandemic.
Yeah, no kidding. And losing your job, that was not planned?
No, not at all. No.
I think what is great about that, or interesting about that, or like an aha moment about that, is that, that could have actually tailspinned you yourself. Like the pandemic's been huge for all of us. All of us. So like we talk about, I've noticed there's different conversations about grief and loss. It's definitely changed how people talk about suicide and how specific and different it is now. And depression is another one that I think I guess because those emotions, grief, loss, depression, anxiety, are coming from a different place where it's a complete lack of our control, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Like your job could, because in your description, it talks about that you came from not just depression, but like lifelong depression, really serious, heavy, and your loss of job. Well, the pandemic could have been the first thing, and then loss of a job could have been the second thing that put you in a tailspin. And instead you wrote a book.
Yeah, well, I've been talking about this a lot lately for some reason. It keeps coming up in conversation, but I was kind of primed for this, it feels like, where I knew I'd be okay. I built myself back up brick by brick, is the way I put it. So the back from where my depression was the deepest, where I'd say I was about 20 years old, I didn't immediately go on antidepressants, and I didn't immediately start things. that maybe would have been the bigger difference, if that makes sense. I started with the really small things, but then I kept those small things up, and I'll probably get more into that later. And I, of
Yeah.
course, talk about it in the book. But I've carried the whole workout plan and the tall glass of water in the morning, and I just kind of carried all these habits into this situation. So I knew when I got clobbered by losing my job, and for some context, I worked in a video production as my day job, but I had a side job as a personal trainer, and of course, you couldn't have people in the gym, and all three television shows I was working on got canceled. We couldn't have people in the studio, so that was it. We were done. Um, so that's just a quick background of what happened there. But like I said, I had accepted there are so many things outside of my control, but I can to an extent control how I react because we co-create our realities. And I kind of just knew how to, at the very least, navigate those internal feelings. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the book is we have the book up, and we have your email. And I just want to do a shout out that if you read the book, please, please, please leave a review, because that's
Oh, thank you.
so important.
I
Um,
appreciate that.
yeah, reviews are just so important. And I put the link in the description again in the comments, but it's also up above. So people, just as an ahead, people can get the book and they can chat with you about it. Let's jump into your story, actually, because the book is your story.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, I try not to talk too much about myself and more about maybe common experiences
Mm,
and things that I did to get out. I get so much into my personal life, but to put things into context because everyone's depression is a little bit different, which I should note. Um, while everyone has a slightly different type of depression, or maybe a radically different type of depression, um, it doesn't mean that theirs is special in a way that they can't get out of it. Because I
mm.
remember at my deepest, it was like, oh, well, nobody knows these exact feelings. I'm that special case. Well, guess what? Everyone with depression has their own special case, but we can all, like I said, co create our reality and build those little steps out. So, that being said, um, yeah, I started noticing things, believe it or not, kind of ticking up when I was in preschool. And I still remember things, just like chemical. Yeah, I remember it
Wow.
pretty clearly actually. And it would kind of come in waves. And this sounds weird for anyone who hasn't been through it, but there'd be a series of a few weeks where it would be a little bit more intense, then it would kind of subside. And that went on until high school, where it started to get a little bit more intense. And then I call it the perfect storm. So it was the summer after I graduated high school. It was about a couple months later. My best friend was killed. So that was obviously a big one. Um, Everyone was moving away, so my kind of social network was missing there. My karate school closed, so I'm a black belt in karate. My karate school closed. That was my other social structure, and then there tends to be this pattern where a lot of the time, late teens, early 20s, quirks, let's say, manifest. So mine all came kind of crashing down within a 3 month period that summer after high school. So that was a pretty deep and dark time. And like I said earlier, really my story for the past X amount of years has been building myself back up, that brick by brick, till eventually, until I got to that point where I was like, okay, I'm in a place now where I can start really sharing these lessons with people because I, I I feel like it has value and it's brought value to other people just through conversations. Again, it wasn't like a planned thing to write this book. It was just such a weird organic thing. Yeah.
Which is great. That's the best way. And I in my experience in interviews, um, those of us who are entrepreneurial spirits or the book writers that share, our goal is to make it faster, easier, and more supported for someone else who's going through a very similar struggle. And also, we become experts in the struggles that we go through because we had to figure out how to navigate them. And so I love that. Tell me, let's go back about preschool and up until I get the perfect storm. You graduate high school, your best friend gets killed, the school shuts down, everyone's moving away from college. You were not moving with them, I'm guessing.
Right.
So that is a perfect storm for things to happen. And it's so relatable now because we've had so much loss around us in the pandemic in the last year and a half in weird ways that we didn't expect. Like the karate school closing. So talk to me about preschool to graduation, what that looked like for you. If you talked to your family about it, if you can recognize something's off and not know how to put words to it. So take me through that process of, because noticing it that young is really outstanding that you even have those memories.
Well, looking back, I now recognize it because at
Yeah.
the time I was in, you're in your own little bubble, your own little world. You don't even assume everybody else is going through it because you're not thinking about anybody else. You're kind of in your own world when you're 5 years old, right? But back, let's just say high school, I just assumed I was a moody punk rocker. And also, I mean, because that's
I
just
mean,
what I thought it was.
that's like your sexy persona, right? Like that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. Right, right, exactly. So that I just assumed it was just kind of a personality type thing, and
Mhm.
it was also a little bit more. I don't want to say it was yeah, it was a stigma. Let's just call it what it was. It was kind of like a stigma, and wasn't nearly as talked about as it is now. Um, but it manifested in some pretty funny ways. Like, well, I say funny, but it wasn't funny for the women I dated, and it wasn't funny for uh, my close friends at the time because I would just have these really sharp declines in mood where I couldn't see the silver lining in anything, and that would last for that could be a couple hours or it could be a couple days. I don't know. Uh, Again, I thought it was a normal thing, but now in hindsight, I can completely recognize where that was coming from for sure.
Is there any idea or ideas of the why you were feeling that way? Or, yeah, I mean, I guess what was it stemming from? You mentioned something chemical in preschool, and everything's like, it's all hindsight, right? I
Yeah,
just
of
wondered if
course.
you recognized it and verbalized it. Um, why do you think now you are having those declines and that moodiness?
So I hadn't been through any capital T traumas, by the time I was in high school. We've all been through some smaller things here and there, of course. Uh, but the best thing I can think of now is my grandmother had pretty deep depression.
Mm.
So, and of course back then that was a real like no to bring up. So it's got to be a genetic thing. I mean, I had no major triggers when I was a little kid.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Interesting.
that absolutely changed once I started getting a little older, and it was kicked off with my best friend getting killed, and there was plenty of stuff after that, which made things a little bit more difficult. But yeah, if I had to put my finger on it, that would be the major factor. Yeah,
Okay. And I mean, here's the interesting, great thing. There doesn't have to be a why or a trigger,
yeah,
even if it's not genetic, right? I think people who are struggling with depression want to figure out, like, why is this happening to me? And sometimes I want to point out, like, there's not necessarily this single why that it's happening and moving forward into, because it is happening, this is what you can do instead. So
thank
I
you.
think
Yeah, that's great. And that reminds me, I mean, this is not to cut you off. I know we have that small delay going
do it.
on, but I had this neck injury, and my doctors spent so much time trying to figure out what I had done to my neck. They're like, "Did you crash a car?" And I was like, "No." They're like, "Are you sure? Did you pass out after you crashed the car?" I was like, "I didn't crash a car." And they spent so much time trying to figure out what happened. I'm like, does it really matter? We know it's hurt. Let's just try to get it better. And eventually
Yeah.
I had to say that. So yeah, on that same note, I'm glad you said that. There are of course things that we may want to work through in therapy, but that doesn't mean we should wait in order to get all these other things lined up and moving in the right direction. So I'm totally with you on that.
Yeah, I think sometimes we ask the wrong questions, right? I'm asking, was there something specific that happened? And you're like, no, there's no reason why it happened. Okay, well then what? So then what? Although you're already struggling with this from your childhood on, gets worse. And you said high school, but like there's hormones, there's
Mhm.
junior high school's awful. Sometimes like
Yes.
none of us, we've all experienced that, right? That's like no surprise. So you're going through some of that normal stuff. You feel like you're just a moody punk rocker. And then, though, to exacerbate that situation, let's talk about graduating high school, your friend, people moving away, and the karate, and how that changed things.
That so radically changed things. It's almost like that was the first big marker in my life of how my
Hmm.
life radically changed. That was an absolute curve in my track. So um, it was at the point. This sounds see, a lot of this is hard to explain to people who haven't been there. So you're gonna have to just kind of imagine this with me. But it literally, you know how you when you see colors, you have emotions that go with those colors. Okay, so it felt like everything went black and white. Like I could see the colors, but everything felt black and white. I and I don't know how to put that into better words. That wasn't the only thing that happened, but that's the best way you could describe it. Just imagine everything going gray,
Yeah.
um, and that constant pit in your stomach, and being tired all day, but being too too anxious to be able to sleep fully. So it was just this weird cloud that lasted about 2 years, where it was at its deepest.
I like the cloud analogy. And no, I get the black and white. And I haven't personally had experiences with depression. I do, though, understand. If you said to me, it feels like my whole life is black and white, I mean, how hard would that be? I would totally get how that felt for you. Your
Yeah,
friend dies, you graduate, your friend dies, and it was unexpected.
yeah,
He wasn't sick, there was nothing wrong. And
no,
what happened? What happened with that?
car accident.
Okay. Um, yeah. So that's devastating, feeling that sort of grief and loss within this black and white world you feel like you're living in.
Hmm.
I know I'm going to want to touch on the so anxious you couldn't sleep thing. So I want to bookmark that right now because I think that that's a really beautiful way to say that, because so many people who don't experience that would be kind of like get a good night's sleep and you'll wake up and you'll feel better after night's sleep, which is true unless that's your reality.
Yeah,
So I just like the way you said that. He passes away, karate school closes, so you've lost your outlet,
yeah.
and then lots of friends moved away. And what were you doing at that point?
I tried going. I had given up the idea of going away to college, and I wasn't going to go far, but I gave up that idea. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go through some community college, a couple miles from my parents'
Yep.
house. Try that, and I failed everything, or I failed or dropped out of everything. I just couldn't do it. I remember sitting in class, 2 weeks into class, I just had a complete panic attack and had to leave, and that was it. I withdrew, and that was it for that semester. I didn't go back to college for another uh, year and a half, 2 years.
When did you recognize that this is depression and it's a problem?
I don't know if I ever really said this is depression. I don't know if I ever really put a label on it, because at first I attributed it to grief, which I know that a big portion of it was grief. But grief is something that we all have to go through. I was on another podcast and a host said something like, grief is the price we pay for love. And I thought that was great.
Hmm.
So, and I had to go through that. But I could tell the difference between this again sounds crazy. My grief cry, my grief for my friend, and my depression cry. I could feel a
Hmm.
difference. Um, so I wasn't really labeling it at the time. I knew things were off, and I attributed it all to grief, not even really recognizing that I was taking this in a different direction and a lot harder than a lot of my friends did. And it wasn't until, so I was still playing in bands at this time. I played in bands all through high school, and I was playing with these bands. And it wasn't until, 2 years later, I was playing in this band with these guys who worked out a lot. They lifted weights, and they were like, "Hey, man, you should join us." And I just, whatever. Okay, I'll play along. I was lifting weights with these guys, and we were out playing shows, so it's not like I had no life, but there wasn't much outside of my band life. And I'm lifting weights,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden something clicked. So I should put this in context. I'm 5'9" and 170 pounds, which is really nothing to talk about. And I'm a personal trainer, so I'm not carrying around a whole lot of extra weight. I'm working out every day. But at that time, I was 5'9", but I was 124 pounds.
Oh,
So
wow.
I was almost, yeah, I was almost 50 pounds lighter than I am now, and I'm a skinny guy. So when I had started lifting weights, I could really tell a difference because it was not just the fun of going and lifting the weights and sometimes hanging out with people while I did it. I could see myself building, into a better person or a better body at the very least. And not only that, I was having fun learning something new. I remember being in bed and reading through these like, those gross like bodybuilders, those huge dudes. Like I was like
Yeah.
reading about those guys, being like, man, even if I can get halfway to these guys, I'd be something pretty cool. So um, that was the first brick for me. It was that physical aspect because I had been a physical guy through karate and stuff, but I wasn't like into working out. It was just a byproduct. But this was something it was that physical change I could see. And like I said, that was brick one, and it all started stacking from there.
It's so amazing. I'm a runner, and I have a good friend that's a runner, and he was in Afghanistan, and a bomb goes off, and he has a traumatic brain injury, and he ends up like gaining a ton of weight. He's on medicine for diabetes, just this list of like
Mm.
7 medications. He becomes overweight because he's so inactive, and a doctor finally looked at him and said, get outside, start walking, start getting exercise. And the walking turned into walking faster and running and more time and more distance. And he ended up a couple of years later off of every single medication that he had been put on after that traumatic brain injury, and his brain started processing better. He'll always have a traumatic brain injury and residual effects. Having said that, you would never in a million years know. And he was
Right
off every
on.
single medication because he was running, he was outside. And so,
Love it.
I don't think we give enough credit to asking how you can get through stuff. I mean, depression, for example, like the chemistry in your brain will change after 20 minutes of being outside, away from traffic. Everything about
Yeah.
your brain chemistry changes, right? And he was such an extreme example of what can happen when you just get outside and walk, and what
Mm.
that can mean. And so I love that you were invited to do something that, like, you had fun with something new, you were feeling better about yourself, but then you have all of these endorphins from exercise that people just don't like. It's massive. It's the best high you can ever have.
Yeah.
So I think that's fantastic. So that was the first brick. So let's keep talking bricks.
Yeah. So, and I talk in bricks because I should note, and I make this very clear in the book, there is no silver bullet. You're not going to do
Right.
one thing and completely cure your depression. So I really feel
Yeah.
like it's that compound effect where we're taking this and this and this. And, instead of having three, now you have a sum of five, even if you're just doing three of these things. That being said, um, when I started working out, uh, it was, of course, the next thing that came was nutrition. So I was looking into things like, oh, well, how can I, build more muscle, or how can I, get in more of the healthy fats, things like that, which of course had its effect on me as well. And I wasn't at a 10 at this point. Let's just say that working out and the dialing in my diet, it took me from a 2 to a 4. Okay. So nothing was an immediate fix. Okay. It took work. It took work. And maybe I'll get more into that later about why I say that. But anyway, the diet was a big thing. And I would say equally as important as finding out the right foods I should be eating, it was finding out the foods I shouldn't be eating.
Yeah.
So I'm a firm believer in everyone in the world should get an allergy test. Um, My wife actually just had an allergy test a couple of years ago and found out she was allergic to, these 4 different foods that she was eating all the time. Her mood was a little off and whatever. Uh, but if people can just sort out these foods that's just making them feel like garbage all the time, a lot of people don't know this, but you create 95% of your serotonin in your gut, not in your brain. So if you're taking in all these foods, let's just say, even if it's not an allergy, but just an intolerance, say it's wheat or say it's dairy, that's a pretty common one. That's not creating a very great um, microbiome in your gut. There are actually doctors now who are prescribing probiotics for depression. Again, I think this is part of it, not all of it, but dialing in your gut health is so important. And of course, throwing in these garbage foods all the time is not doing your brain any favors. So that was that was my next break, was finding out, hey, what's working, what's not.
What a journey, right? I mean, I still want to get the IgG food sensitivity blood test. And the example
Mm.
in that was like the guy who's doing fitness competitions and finds out that he is triggered by chicken. That's the worst. I've done fitness competitions. That would be like a nightmare but it's that. It's like you don't know what is being triggered. And they call the gut the second brain. I think it's the first one, because so much more is happening in your gut than you have any idea. And I love doctors that are cluing into that. And so huge, so huge. You don't know. It could be something so innocuous. You're not like blowing up and needing an EpiPen or a hospital. It's more like that slow, steady burn in the bad way, like running in the background because you're eating something you don't realize your body is negatively reacting to. So man, I love this one. I love this book.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, our brains are part of our bodies. So if we're going to have our body full of inflammation, well, that's not doing our brain any favors.
Inflammation has become such a much bigger thing now. And it's so important. And we show inflammation in so many ways, even like I have a super clean diet, but there are
Mm,
certain times that for whatever reason, I just know I call it feeling sludgy, where
mm,
for whatever's triggering that you feel, and it's more inflammation.
mm.
Like, well, did you eat something bad? Are you not drinking enough water? Yeah, something's irritating my system and my inflammation is
Interesting
higher.
enough, and this is worth noting just as a side note, I found out through this, through my inflammation and through all of my little trials, I found out that by taking something for my inflammation, ibuprofen, that was actually making it worse on me. So it turns out I have an intolerance to ibuprofen. I would actually get canker sores all the time. I didn't know why. And I would be like, man, I'm not feeling great. I'm going to take some ibuprofen. I would end up feeling worse. So it turns out, yeah, it's just a funny side note, right? So,
Right.
try to, if anybody's in the dark on any of these kind of things, maybe talk to your doctor about these as well, because everyone doesn't act this way to these different over the counter drugs.
Right. Oh my gosh. How did you find that out?
Oh man, it's been a while. It was through, actually, believe it or not, I was trying to get down to the bottom of why I was getting canker sores. I was trying to get down to the bottom of it, and it was just through a simple Google search. And I was cutting things out one at a time, and it was like the third thing I found the ibuprofen I was taking pretty much every other day from lifting weights. Yeah.
That's so crazy. But it's that stuff. It's being really like I'm keeping a tally of the things that you did to beat depression, right? Like the learning something new, feeling good, looking at altering your relationship with food, changing your diet. And you have to be, I mean, the bottom line is that you have to be your own advocate and you have to be really curious and very out of the box, which are things I love. And still, like it's still you and more and do that more. So I love this. Let's keep going.
Thanks. Yeah. Can I give you my next brick?
Yes. Yes, I'm ready.
Cool. So this wasn't, again, it was just like the book. This wasn't something that I had like made the sheet and went and checked through it. This was all very organic. So I got the working out sorted out, and I did the food thing. Well, of course, the next natural thing for me was supplementation.
Mm.
So sorting out what I needed again to bring my inflammation down or just get my mood up. Again, very simple. Um, internet searches got me a lot of these answers. However, I should note that I tend to be very picky about who I cite or what my sources are. So always things like Johns Hopkins or um, Healthline's a really good one. Harvard's a great one. Mayo Clinic. So this is kind of like my golden four. So I would always check those, their latest papers, their latest research papers. And I was lucky enough to where I'd had some classes about the reading research papers in college to where I could breeze through them pretty quickly. Anyway, um, so I found out through when I was getting my allergy tests done, I got some blood tests done, and I don't know what it's like where you're at, but I'm here in New Jersey. And here in New Jersey, some staggering amount of us, it's more than half of us, are extremely low in vitamin D. And I was
Mm.
dangerously low in vitamin D. So to the point where they had given me, they called them D bombs. They were these little blue pills that you took once a week. You don't even take them every day. You took them once a week to try to get your vitamin D levels up. My vitamin D was so low, I had little micro cracks in my neck. So it was pretty low. And
Wow.
apparently, a lot of us in the Northeast are walking around like that just because we just don't get the sun to be able to absorb the vitamin D. Okay, so that being said, there is a correlation. They're not sure if there's a causation or anything, but there is a correlation between low vitamin D and depression. May as well take care of that anyway, right? So of course, if you're getting that allergy test done, you may as well get some of your levels checked out as well. Okay.
Mm.
So I did that, and then this was about the time when the omega 3s thing was finally getting really big. So I was making sure I took a fish oil or a flaxseed oil. Uh, and then the biggest one probably for me is turmeric.
Yeah.
Now, turmeric, a lot of people know what that is. Of course, everyone who knows it loves it. So turmeric's kind of like a ginger root, but it's way more effective to take the supplement than it is to eat it. Eating it's still great for you, but when you take the supplement, they just take the active compounds out of it called the curcuminoids. And a lot of the time, they'll package it with black pepper. Now, you'll want to find a kind with black pepper or put some black pepper on your food when you take it because that will increase the bio. You'll be able to absorb way more turmeric than if you had taken it alone. Again, it can be called curcuminoids or curcumin. You may see it. It's all the same thing. It's all that compound out of turmeric. Yeah.
Um, I was having a conversation with my husband about this yesterday. And the thing that's crazy, I remember talking to a guy who said, yeah, I thought my testosterone was low because it's testosterone. These are the things that happen when your testosterone drops. And I'm having all these symptoms. And when he had his blood checked, it was vitamin D. And he had to get injections
Wow.
because it was so, right? And so
Wow.
again, I'm a runner, so I'm outside all the time, except runners have one of the lowest vitamin Ds because they slather so much sunblock on them. Their time outside is like, yeah. So I have mine checked every year. I have for probably 10 to 15 years, like my blood work every year. I get my vitamin D checked because
Good
it
for you.
affects so much. So I'm on all three of those supplements like every day, 4 years, huge, totally agree. But yeah, people really need to be aware of the side effects of not having enough vitamin D because it looks and acts like other things. And if you're not adding that to get it checked, you're never going to, it's so easy. Like if you like
Mm-hmm.
get your blood checked, it's so easy. I do it once a year. It's easiest thing ever. And probably one of the most least expensive or the most covered through insurance. And so like to not do it and add vitamin D, just crazy. So yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Next brick.
Whew. Well, here it can kind of go into a few different directions. And of course, each of these things I talk about is its own chapter in the book. Somewhere around here, I did find yoga, which of course was its own magical thing, super great. I love yoga. I'm actually a yoga teacher now. I just became a yoga teacher a couple months ago. Um, so yoga was great. Let me get this out before I forget. If
Yeah.
anybody knows anyone or loves anyone with depression, my first piece of advice almost always is to a yoga class. Say, and frame it this way. Say, hey, I'm feeling kind of anxious. Would you mind coming with me to a yoga class? So, number one, you're going to get that person to come out instead of like saying like, hey, you should do this. You're going to kind of, it's going to be a little bit more enticing. Also, you're going to get them feeling kind of good. Like, oh, I'm doing this person a favor. Yeah, I'll come out to a yoga class with them. So get them out to a yoga class, because in yoga, you're not only getting the physical aspect, you're getting that, you're getting introduced to meditation, at the very least introduced, if they're not already doing it. Also, you're getting them in this great social environment where they're learning new things, and you don't have a whole lot of jerks hanging out at yoga studios. So it's going to be a friendly environment. So I highly, highly recommend asking friends to come to a yoga studio. Okay. So we got that. Just wanted to get that out there. And I can go into a bunch of different directions. I would like to, just in case we run out of time, I would like to point out that I am medicated. I'm on an SNRI, which is an antidepressant, and I should be open about that. However, that was the kind of the last brick that I had laid on top. This is a few years ago at this point. So, and in a way, I'm happy I did that last, because I was still stacking these other habits, one after another, where I felt like I'd exhausted everything. And it was okay, I'm feeling pretty good. And I could have gone the rest of my life and I would have been okay. But I wanted to stack that very last thing. So so I am on an antidepressant, and I do talk about that in the book, about reasons people could be concerned, and my exact experience with it, and the side effects and how they went away, things like that. I would really like more people to kind of talk about their experiences with it, because back when I was growing up, antidepressants were for crazy people. And the stories I heard were things like, oh, you know, when people take that, their personalities radically change, or they lose all creativity, which is the big one that kept me away from them when I was in my early 20s, because I was playing in bands, I was writing songs. Like I couldn't go without that. That was the only thing I had going for me at the time. So I that didn't happen. And I feel like that's important. You know, I felt a little weird the first couple of weeks, and I talk about what I mean by weird in those first few weeks, but that all gradually tapered off. So I at the very least, it's worth a discussion with your doctor if you are suffering. Okay. I'm totally back to normal now. All of my side effects went away. That's worth noting. Also worth noting, I have a friend who has absolutely severe anxiety, really crippling. And his psychiatrist, his primary care doctor, were both telling him to go on this one drug. I believe it was an SSRI. And I was telling him as well, he was nervous. He eventually made the move. He's like, you know, I feel a lot better, but I don't feel like I'm already there. And I was like, well, yeah, dude. And we talked about this before. There is no silver bullet. You still have to do the work. So even if you're starting with the medication and you're not feeling 100% there, well, yeah, you still got to do the work. It's not going to all be there for you. You have to put the effort into it in order to get all the full benefits, because this is pretty much a lifelong battle. The good news that comes with that, though, is all of these habits that I make sure I do every single day, they're good for anybody. They're just good for general health to begin with. I mean, I think everybody should be working on eating right and meditating and, you know, whatever it is. So that's the good news. So you're kind of like, it kind of forces you onto this healthy lifestyle.
You're right. And I think it's so important. And I want to, first, I love that you mentioned the antidepressant, and that is right for some people. So I have kids who have explored this for anxiety or depression. And I'm like, look, there is nothing wrong if that's what you need, because your health and mental well-being is the most important. Having said that, there's an awful lot you can do on your own. My opinion is, if you're not doing all of these things as healthy living, because they're preventative. They're preventative for depression and anxiety, and also they're what can help you get out of that. If you're not doing this and you want the medication, it's not a magic wand. Like you said, you have to do the work. So my recommendation to the kids, if it's not urgent, do all this first. And if you still need this other thing, there is no shame in that.
Agreed. And so I get asked this a lot. People say, oh, do you wish you had done it in high school? Well, you know, part of me, who knows how it would have turned out if by doing this. I mean, they mean going on antidepressants. Well, maybe, you know, my life maybe would have been a little easier, maybe not. I don't know. But in a way, I'm glad I built everything up beforehand. I had built this entire life of healthy living before I went on them. Whereas some people, they take these pills, that may not be even on their radar. They're just like, okay, the
Yeah.
pills make me better. And that's a really dangerous thing to be like, oh,
Yep.
well, I actually have a friend. She's not going to listen to this. She, she was pre-diabetic and she literally was taking her pre-diabetes medicine with soda. She was drinking it with
Oh,
soda,
oh my gosh.
right? And her mindset, oh well, the drugs will fix me. It's like, no, no, no. Well, try cutting out the soda first, then we'll try the drugs. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm with you on that one. Yeah.
And I love that you had so many results from this and it changed your life. You're correct. And I mean, that's why I've encouraged my kids. Like, there are all these things. If you're eating crap and you're not taking any supplements and you're not getting outside and you're not taking care of your health, chances are pretty good that depression, anxiety is not going to go away. That doesn't mean it will get rid of all of it. And that's
Right.
okay. But if you're not doing everything you can, like, that just kills me. And that's kind of what I mean. Like, don't take the anti-diabetic with your soda, right? Like,
Yeah.
and expect it to do the work. That's a thing. And if things are urgent, get on the antidepressant medication. And also, you can do all these other things to help you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it is worth mentioning that stuff. So after the supplements, and I'm glad we went off track and looked at the antidepressants and that different stuff, because
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of shame around that, and there shouldn't be.
Yeah. No, well, we don't shame people for taking drugs for shingles or whatever pops up in their lives, right? So
Right.
why would you shame anyone for that, right? So that's the way I see it at the very least. And I do think things are moving in that direction.
Me too.
Um,
I do too.
so believe it or not, this is about the point in my life, and then I'm on 24 at this point. This is about where things start to shift into mindset. So I remember feeling embarrassed being in like the self-help section at the bookstore and trying not
Mm,
to be seen. And I my attitude now is, well, what the heck else is there better to read? You know what I mean? Making
right.
yourself better for yourself and your relationships, things like that. But at the time, I was very hesitant, and certainly when I was depressed, I wouldn't have even touched that stuff. And I had so much anxiety, I would have been too embarrassed to be there, or I would have been so grouchy about reading all this stuff, be like, oh yeah, right, that stuff works for other people, but I'm too far gone. However, since I had started dialing in all those other things and started learning new things and seeing my physical changes, it's like, well, maybe I can make some pretty serious changes in my mind. So that was when I started digging into a lot of this like self-improvement stuff. And it wasn't so much the Pollyanna rah rah, we got this positive thinking type stuff. Some of it, I mean, maybe a little bit of it was, but uh, I had a wide enough variety where um, it was just taking things in those micro goals. It was like when I would feel anxious and totally overwhelmed about, let's just say, finances, I would find a
Mm,
book, that was the equivalent of Finances for Dummies, and just take it one step at a time, knowing that I can't fix everything overnight. I can't make $1 million overnight, and I can't read an entire book overnight. But what I can do is read that first chapter, log it, put those things into practice, and then move on. And speaking of, I'll note this now. If anybody wants that chapter on mindset, that's the one I typically give away because that tends to be the weirdest one to talk about because it's all like, uh, up here, up in the head stuff. But if anybody wants that chapter, feel free to email me. I'm assuming you'll have my email somewhere.
mhm.
Yeah, feel free to email me, and I'm happy to send everybody a free chapter and see if this book is their cup of tea or not. I think it's a pretty good representation of how the rest of the book goes, anyway.
I love that. So you got into self-help, you're reading, you're learning about any topic that's coming up, and that started to take you in another direction, right?
Yeah, well, I started to build confidence, and I went to grad school, I which was a pretty unique experience. It wasn't the title that made me better. It was that was when I started to embrace the challenges in life, where it was like, oh, it's not the title, it's what I need to become in order to get that master's degree, what I need to do in order to get that. And because it was so difficult, so challenging, excuse me, I was listening to a lot of the self help stuff on my drive back and forth from New Jersey to DC, where I went to school. And a lot of that was going on. So it was like, oh, like I'm kind of enjoying this challenge and enjoying taking these mental models I had learned of taking things one step at a time and keeping my body in check and kind of navigating my life. Um, so the grad school thing was great. Now, it was at that point where I finally felt comfortable talking about this with my primary care doctor, and she's great. Um,
Okay. I mean, that's
yeah,
a lot and a long time to go. You're doing a lot. Had you gotten the blood work for vitamin? You had gotten the blood work for vitamin D.
I had already done that. I had already
Okay.
done
Okay.
that. Yeah, yeah. That wasn't. I still felt like it was a secret. Just finding the vitamin
Mm,
D was just part of a normal blood test type thing.
got it.
Uh, so I finally felt like I should talk about this with my doctor. Now, I did talk about this with therapists here and there, and this is worth
Okay.
noting as well. So, when my best friend was killed, I went to a therapist for one day and I didn't like it. And I was like, okay, therapy's not for me. That's the end of it. And I was completely wrong. I was 18 years old. I was talking to some strange woman I had never met before. And I just, that maybe that wasn't the time for me. I wasn't ready to be open yet. But
Hmm.
typically, when you're looking for a therapist, it takes a few different tries. So it took me, I think, my fourth one where I finally felt comfortable. It turns out he was my psychology professor in college. I just went up to him one day after class and I was like, "Hey, do you take private clients?" Luckily, he said yes, and he again radically changed my life.
Mm.
So if you are thinking about therapy, man, they're really good at. Let's put it this way: it's hard to read the label when you're inside the bottle. So
Oh, what a
you,
great saying.
so when the therapists, they're on the outside and they don't have all these other contexts. It's a completely its own context. It's not, a family thing. It's not a friend thing. They're right there to read this bottle for you and read it right back to you. And I learned so much about how my mind works and just about how maybe snags in relationships, where they came from, things like that.
Mhm,
So if
mhm.
it's on your mind, of course, all these things, I understand there's a cost. I understand these things can be expensive. But of course, we're talking about if you have the luxury, if you can find ways to find therapy for free, or even find the cost effective ways to get the food and the workouts and all these kind of things, right? There's always inexpensive ways if you spend enough time searching it. Um, but it's worth pursuing at the very least.
I think a lot has changed in the pandemic for the better in some ways because so many people are a much more online presence. We all had to go online. So this is something I'd like to say on that, speak to that. Like you found somebody that you were comfortable with and asked, that is the best. I think that's the best option. And like I have found talk therapy to work and talk therapy to not work. And I've found other modalities that worked better, but it is situational. So
Yeah,
don't rule things out. And also because everyone has gotten online. And since this pandemic, one great thing is that everyone's online and it's common to do things via Zoom. And we should be by now pretty comfortable with that. And no, it's not maybe as ideal as in person. What is different though is that the radius of finding a therapist is massive now.
yeah, yeah,
Massive. So yes, there is a cost. So I understand that. And like, I haven't had medical insurance for 5 years. So amen. I get it. I get that it's a cost. However, having said that, when you want to find somebody, the world is open to you to do a Zoom with a therapist. So there is a lot of research that needs to go into finding somebody that fits you. Like it took you going through several people and asking somebody. However, the world's opened up to us a lot more, which makes it considerably easier to find somebody that fits very specifically to what you're looking for. So that's something that I love. I think it's a great thing that's come out of the pandemic. It,
yeah.
right? Go
No, I'm
ahead.
with. I know. I'm just agreeing with you. I'm totally with you and that's important to note that there have been silver linings. Of course, it's been a horrible time, but there have been good things that come out, and yeah, that's one of the biggest ones. Just like what you said there.
Yeah. So let's talk about what is the next thing that um, was helpful for you. I'm on it. Let's go.
It was finally dialing in my meditation practice, which, to be honest, I still struggle with. I mean, I'm a yoga teacher and I'm still struggling with it. It's a lot easier to feel like we're doing something and being and checking something off of our checklist. Um, Funny enough, meditation is on my checklist, things I have to do every day. But
Right.
it's so hard for us to slow down and just give ourselves those few minutes sitting still. Um, Also, that's been the funny enough, the biggest pushback in my book has been about the meditation. People saying to me, "Oh, well, I can't meditate." And I know people who, and I'm not going to name names, but people in my yoga classes who get up and leave during shavasana, which is the meditation part at the very end. They're like, "Oh, well, I can't meditate. That's the end of it." So, which is craziness to me, right? So, and I get being overwhelmed by not by meditation in general. So I do talk about, I believe I talk about this in the book, we'll talk about it right now. Just like a quick concentration practice, which is a little bit different from meditation, but it's a nice way to kind of sharpen your mind and get it into that mode. So have you ever heard of box breathing?
Yeah.
Okay, so for anyone who hasn't heard of box breathing, it's all done through your nose. You breathe in for a count of four, hold for a count of four, out for a count of four, hold for a count of four, all through your nose. And the idea is first we're doing it through our nose if we can, because when the air rushes through, it's easier to have that diaphragmatic breath, that nice deep belly breath, as opposed to that shallow lung breath where we're going up and down. It's that horizontal breath where we're going in and out. Um, we have that rush of air going over the back of our nasal cavity, and that activates our parasympathetic nervous system because we have a little cluster of nerves back there that picks that up. So our parasympathetic nervous system is our rest and digest, kicks us into that. Then also, when we do the box, we can visualize this box when we're doing our breathing. So we're visualizing, it's getting our brain kind of primed for that meditation. So if the meditation is completely off your radar, you're thinking that's not for you, try with this concentration practice and see how that works for you first.
And actually, there's a lot of science behind breathing and slowing yourself down. So that, meditation for me, I felt like a meditation failure until I did guided meditation, and I also fell off. And so and I'm taking notes about this, so I'm going to have a big note in the comments with all of these things. And for me, my yoga meditation is the slow breathing. And for me, because I'm a Christian woman, it's my scripture reading, meditation on what I'm learning, my prayers. It's really like tuning into what are the deep things in my heart that I want to present. Um, and on a side note for that, when you're exercising, there's such a change in my brain chemistry. I mean, yes, there is scientifically, but outside of that, when I'm running, like I'm a person that I'll say, like, I almost never feel angry, right? I rarely feel angry. When I'm out running, I realize how pissed I am. And so you have to find ways that work for you to really tune into how you're feeling and then admit it. And then kind of, I guess for me, it's like offering up what's deep in my heart, if
Yeah,
that makes sense. And
absolutely.
you're describing yoga and meditation and breathing. And I'm saying, yeah, it's the same thing. I just do it in a different way. And when I feel off on what I'm feeling or in denial of what I'm feeling, all it takes is for me to get outside on a run or a walk. Man, walk my dog 2 miles and I'll come back letting you know how I'm feeling inside. So I think don't feel like a meditation failure. I found guided meditation and then I needed to switch it to something that was more Christian based to click for me. And
Mhm.
so, like, yes, don't feel like a failure. Find the way that works. I think
Yeah,
is the biggest thing with that meditation aspect. Anyone can do it. Having said that, you have to find the way that works for you.
absolutely. And
So,
when your mind wanders, and it will,
yeah,
just bring it back. And then it's
yeah,
going to wander and then bring it back. And guess what? The bringing it back, that's the exercise. Be cool with that. You do it for a month, you're going to notice you have to pull it back a little less often, less
less,
often.
less.
So just don't get frustrated. I know it's tough, and I know
Yeah,
it's, yeah, because we're not used to that. Our brains are never given that chance to rest and to really focus or whatever have you, right? Uh,
yes,
so just go easy on yourselves, guys. Is what I'm saying.
yeah. It's interesting that that's the biggest pushback. Well, because I think it's the hardest for people to look. I mean, I was born in 70. We didn't have, like, my first daughter is 29, and she was several years old before internet was around and in our home. And so she remembers, my 29-year-old daughter, almost 30-year-old daughter, remembers her life pre-internet, and most people
Wow.
now don't.
Yeah.
And we had ways that we automatically slowed ourselves down pre-internet
Yeah.
because we weren't sped up that much. We didn't
My
live life on speed.
Yeah, yeah. I would love to make this happen, and I recognize how tough it is. My one professor, she does what she calls a digital Sabbath, where she
Yeah.
literally turns off her computer, turns off her phone for the entire day, and she has kids, which is great. So she spends the whole day with her husband and kids. Uh, I'm not there yet, but man, imagine how great that would be for our minds if we could all do that once a week.
Well, even an hour before bedtime.
Oh well,
Like
yeah. I mean, that should
like
be without saying, right? Yeah,
start small, right? Like
yeah, yeah.
most of my kids are adults now. For me, I could turn off all my computers but my phone, just because I want contact with my
Mhm.
kids. And also, like, everything has good and evil in it.
Of
So
course.
internet has tons. I just talked about how you can find a therapist anywhere in the world that's the right fit for you, instead of having to being forced to find somebody in your town or whatever. And there's good and evil in all of that. So just taking a break and slowing down, but like, that's a lost art almost now.
Yeah, yeah. It
Yeah.
really is.
Okay, let's talk about the next thing. I don't know how many things there are. I'm going to keep going till you cut me off.
Uh, well, we'll make this the last one. I know you've got a busy day. Uh, then I don't want to hold everybody up. So this last one is actually, this is kind of an embarrassing one, but I'll open up to you on this one.
Yeah.
So I literally make photocopies uh, once every couple weeks of these daily lists of things that I want to get through. Like I said, that what I was talking about in the beginning, the glass of water. The very first thing on my list is this glass of water. So to give you a quick context, on one side is all these things that I want to get done every single day. And that's what I make copies of, just
Okay.
because I got tired of writing it by hand every single day. The other side is stuff that's pertinent to what's going on in my life at that moment. So like I said, I just got married last, so there were wedding things on that side, things that only happened once, or I'm for, that mattered at that moment, right? So I keep the water on the top and I keep it there. Look, I know I'm going to drink that glass of water. However, I get that win. Of course, I get the glass of water, I drink it, I'm going to be a little bit better off because we all wake up a little dehydrated. Great. But also taking that pen and crossing it off, that's my first win of the day. So I
Ah,
start my day with a win. And then it's like, boom, I've already started and it was easy. Now on to the next one. And my next one, just embarrassing. I have a healthy breakfast with only 3 different types of breakfast. So I know it's going to be heavy. Then my supplements that I'm going to take in the morning. Cross those off. That's my next win. Boom. I'm already off to the races, off on the right foot. Uh, and then it depends on it all depends on you, right? People had asked me why I didn't put a checklist in the book. It's like, well, everybody has their own special things they want to do. Like I have to do certain stretches, things like that maybe wouldn't work for other
mhm,
people.
mhm.
Um, but I'm a firm believer in doing this every day. It feels weird carrying around a notebook or keeping a notebook by or keeping a sheet of paper in your pocket at first. After a while, it becomes the norm. And I say that because I feel like it's really important to have it on a piece of paper, not on your phone. There's something about bringing these ideas and the accomplishments into the real world, not digitally. Something about crossing them off physically really sets things in the right direction and gives you that kind of reward as opposed to doing, typing something on your screen.
I mean, and like, I geek out on the science behind the things, right? There is a lot of science behind the things about physically writing. So
Oh, right on.
I have my clients tell me, I mean, I tell them, write down 3 things you're grateful for. It's bullet points, it's quick, it's easy, but 3 new things every day, and physically write them. And
Right
then
on.
just do the next 3 things and the next 3 things every single day, because you're training your brain to search for the positive in the world. And so I
Mm.
do the same thing with my lists and cross them off. As a matter of fact, if I do something that's not on the list, I will write it on my list so I can cross it off.
I
Right.
love that. I
And
love
there is
that.
actually science behind doing that.
That's great.
So
I think I'm sure I've done the same thing, and I think that's great. And if it sounds silly to anybody listening, yeah, it sounds silly, but give it a shot. See how you feel.
100% give it a shot. 100% give it a
Yeah,
shot. Like, you have nothing to lose and everything to gain, right? It's crazy how much it
yeah,
helps. So yeah, I
yeah.
don't think it sounds crazy because it's true. Also, it's like, did you mention before accountability?
I didn't, but we
Like,
can talk about that.
okay, all right. So it's like when you were with the band, you have your sessions with the band that where you're meeting them, right? And that appointment is accountability. And then them saying, hey, meet us for the workout at 10 o'clock every morning. And that is accountability. And I think it's really important to mention that if you set things up, you have accountability. And that list is my personal accountability.
Yes, thank you.
It,
Yes,
it's me
because
checking in
sometimes
with
working.
me. Mhm.
Yes, yes, thank you. And I can understand, like, if I had said, "Hey, I want to work out with you guys every Saturday or every whatever at whatever time," maybe that would have been a little mean. I would have pulled out. But writing that list and having it with you—that's your personal accountability. So that may be a great place to start too, with people who have anxiety issues and maybe are too afraid of letting people down. Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah, so your list is like your personal accountability, basically. I mean, essentially, that's
Yeah,
what it is. It's you. And look, I want to be a priority to myself because I am the best version of myself for everyone around me. And
yeah,
that list and crossing it off is a way that you can be accountable to yourself. And yeah, sure, like I remember I need to drink water. I've been doing it the whole time I have it, right? But when I write it down, it's different. It feels different. I'm creating accountability for myself. So I think, yeah, that's huge. Wow. I mean,
love it.
usually in my interviews, I'm like, tell me about your struggle so people can relate, which we did. You did that great. And then I'm like, share tips and tricks. And I think this is the most jam packed tips and tricks. And I'd like to point out that it's not necessary. You mentioned like this is good preventative medicine, whether you have depression or not. You said that earlier.
Yeah,
And
that was
I,
the
I
nicest.
mean,
Yeah, that was
yeah,
one of the nicest compliments I had gotten about the book. They were like, this would really be good for anybody, not just people with depression. I was like, oh, well,
yeah.
thank you.
Well, I've never struggled with depression and I bought your book. So,
Oh, thank you.
oh, you're welcome. I'll even leave a review after I read it.
Ah, thank you very much.
Um, so I think what this is like really good lessons of what you should be doing in your life. And I use the word preventatively because we don't want to get into that space.
Yeah,
And if you're struggling with it, still preventatively because it's a huge laundry list of things you can do to feel better, regardless of your situation.
yeah,
Right.
absolutely. We co-create our realities, so that's an important note. I know I said that twice before, but it's important. We co-create. It's not all out of our control. It's not all in our control, of course, but it's
Mhm.
not all out of our control either.
This has been so fun and so fantastic, but you're like my people. So, of course, it's great. What would you like to leave people? Is there anything that we haven't covered, or maybe like the biggest win, or something that you would like to leave people on? And I just want to thank you for being here.
Oh no, thank you so much for having me. It really is an honor. I'm just so stoked to be here, and I'm so happy that you're fighting the good fight as well. That's another great thing that's come out of this pandemic is maybe more people are tuning into you and seeking things out, and you're the one there giving it, giving of yourself. So I think that's great.
Thanks.
Uh, so I will leave you with this. This was an important one at the time, especially when I started pulling out of it. Um, Practice forgiveness, of course, with yourself, but practice forgiveness for other people. Um, they don't know what you're going through because they can't know what you're going through. That's You're going through a pretty unique experience that's unique to you, this depression. And people will say stupid things. And maybe I'll leave it at that. They will say stupid things, but if you practice that forgiveness and realize that they don't know what you're going through because they can't know that you're not carrying around that burden. It's not for you to carry around, right? So you can just leave that where it is and go along about your day without carrying around the stupid thing somebody said to you.
Oh, I love that. Zack, thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Worldwide epidemic of healing, gratitude, and joy. Thank you for investing your time with me. It would be amazing if you would share this episode with someone who could benefit from it. Reach out to me on any platform. You are worth it to me. Remember to subscribe, like, leave a review, and connect with me. Until next time.